as you know, we have just released Symfony 2.1. So this talk is about, what's next. And of course, you can probably guess that we are going to add some more features for the next version, whatever we are going to call it. We are probably going to make things easier. We are probably going to add some more documentation. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about something totally different. And I think this is the right time to discuss that matter. And so, this morning, Dries talked about some secrets about how to grow an open source community. And one of the secrets was about having some growing pains, right? And the good news is that we have some growing pains. And I think that, the best way to fix them is probably to start from scratch again and start working on Symfony version 3. Are you excited about it? Yeah? I think, some people were quite excited when they read my tweet about this this morning. And some others were, well, less enthusiastic. Right? And, yeah. So, but of course, I was just talking about a mention of Symfony 3, and I think that it's done, right? So, time to move on to something else. So tonight I won't talk about Symfony 3, and honestly, I would not be that excited if we were about to, do another big bang in the Symfony world. Instead, I'm going to talk about the Symfony release process. I know, it's not, very sexy. But this is actually one of the problems we need to fix. But first, what would be a keynote without, some words about the community, about the people working on Symfony, working with Symfony on a day-to-day basis. You know that Symfony enjoys a large community of developers, of dedicated developers working hard to make Symfony better. So they contribute code, they contribute bundles, they contribute, documentation, they write blog posts, they advocate Symfony in their companies. And I believe that an open source project would be nothing without its community. And that's why I like to think as Symfony as being a big family, right? Before being a project. And, some members of the community joined the Symfony project a very long time ago, and they are still very active in the project. And Bernard, who is the driving force behind the form framework, the Symfony 2 form framework, is one of them. And Chris Warsmith is another one. He was involved in Symfony 1 a lot, and actually was the Symfony 1.4 release manager. He's the main brand behind Aesthetic, which is the one of the PHP asset manager, a very good one, and then some more. And today, Chris needs our help. So his wife was diagnosed with cancer a year ago, and she died a couple of weeks ago. And Chris has 3 beautiful young kids. And, I'm sure that many of us make a living out of Symfony. Many of us enjoy, working with Symfony on a day-to-day basis. And part of that is thanks to Chris' work. So today, it's the right time to give back something. There are many things you can do. You can, just make a tweet. You can send him a postcard. You can send him an email. And you can also be part of the fundraising that was set up some time ago. And so the target is $50,000. So we are almost there, but not yet. So if you can help, consider, making a donation. And there is no small donations, really. So in advance, thank you very much for him. Okay, so it's going a bit hard to come back to Symfony 2, but such is life. So last week, Symfony 2.1 the final release, was published after a year of artwork. Right? During the past year, I merged more than 1,000 pull requests. Each pull request being a small enhancement, a small bug fix or a big feature. More than 1,000. It means that, more than 20 per week or 4 every single working day. That's a lot. That's really a lot. And that was possible because those pull requests came from many developers, hundreds of developers. And that's great. And I'm not even talking about all the people working on something else. The bundles. We have a large number of bundles, 1,600 of them, I think. And all the documentation works. So this is just mind-blowing, really. And so Symfony is like a train, a high-speed train, actually, and you cannot stop that train. Because every single day, someone, somewhere in the world, is going to submit a new feature, a bug fix, or an enhancement for the documentation. And whenever it's time to start a train for release, this is not that easy, because there is always someone that wants, to push this last feature just before the release, or she wants to fix this last bug before the release because this is really important for a project somewhere, right? So you can imagine that when I try to stop the train, to say, okay, we are going to stop, we need to make a release, that's not easy. It takes time, right? So what is the next stop for Symfony? And the next stop is obviously the next release, but when will we be able to do that, right? In a month, in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years? Right now, nobody can answer this question. But before I answer the question, when we will be able to release Symfony 2.2, I want to think about, why do we even have releases? Why? Right? Think about it for a minute. Before Symfony 2.0, before it was even released, so many people were already using it for production websites, right? So, and it worked quite well, actually. So what are the benefits of, making a release of the software? I think that, a release is an amazing thing. It is a very special moment in the life of a software. First, this is a very energizing moment, right? Many people work so hard for a period of time, making, Symfony better. The release is the time when everyone who participated somehow can be proud of what they've done. This is the time when we can congratulate each other. And a release is also something we can use as a publicity, blog post, press releases, tweets, and retweets. So a release is a unique opportunity to talk about what we have done so far. And it's not really about the marketing. It's about, talking with passion about what we do and why we are doing it. This is also a time when you can get more contributors and you can get new users also. A release is also the beginning of another life for the software. So the work we did is now going to be used by a larger number of developers and companies. And as soon as you make a release, you get a huge amount of feedback, right? So the more you release, the more feedback and testing you have. So making a release means that you have more feedback on your work. People start using it in real-world situations, real-world projects. So they can tell you how the software behaves in those situations and if the new features and the enhancements you've done actually work for them and if they think that they can be improved somehow. So the conclusion might be, okay, so let's do more releases, right? if there are so many benefits, what about releasing more often? What about releasing every 6 months, or every month, or every week? Why not? And you probably know some websites, and they make release every week or even every single day. Yeah, and that works. So, of course, I think that a lot of the benefits would disappear if we were releasing Symfony every week or every day. It won't be a special moment anymore. So, it would become just a routine. But it's also not possible because we have users, a lot of users, right? So releases are a good thing for the project itself and for all the contributors, but what about its customers? And I think a release has a lot of value for the customers too. Whenever a release is published, core developers are moving away from the old version to work on the next one. But end users will use the just released version for quite some time. So what about them? I think, first, they will find bugs, right? So hopefully not many, but they will definitely find bugs. So, and of course, they expect us to fix them. And if there is a new version of PHP, sometimes it's going to break some features in Symfony, or any software for that matter. And of course, we need to fix that also. And of course, if there's a security issue, they expect you to fix it. So they need support. We are talking about bug fixes, security issues, but of course, no new features. So support is really just about fixing stuff. So how long do they need support for any given version? 6 months? 2 months? A month? A year? So the answer is interesting by itself, but I think it's not the most important one. I think the most important thing they want to know is the amount of time they are going to have to be able to upgrade to the next version, right? So whenever you decide to stop supporting a version, how much time they will have to upgrade to the next supported version. So are we talking about a month, 2 months, 6 months? Of course, the longer the better for the user. But at the same time, core developers don't want to maintain too many versions in parallel, right? Because, also because new versions can be much different from the older ones. So maintaining old versions become more and more difficult. It takes time, and less developers are willing to invest time doing that. So we need to find a compromise, right? The conclusion is support needs to be limited in time. And last but not least, as a user, you need to know when the next version will be released, right? Imagine if you know in advance when the next version will be released, and you know in advance the time you will have to upgrade, you would be able to plan, this upgrade process. So that's cool. And of course, another benefit is that if you are starting a new project, it would be much easier to decide which version to use, right? So I think that, the new release process for Symfony needs to take into account all those good reasons to make a release, all the reasons I've just talked about. And if we look at the past, it took us 2 years to release Symfony 2.0. I mean, it was to be expected. It was, read from scratch. So, and honestly, I think 2 years is not that much for, such a huge task. And it took us a year to release Symfony 2.1. And I'm sure that with a better release process, we should be able to talk about Symfony 2.2 right now, right? So we missed the opportunity to release Symfony 2.1 earlier this year. And if we have a look at the past, the Symfony 1 release process, a year is actually the average amount of time between 2 major Symfony 1 releases. So it was never written, right? But that's what happened. So I've talked about adopting a shorter release cycle for quite some time now, and I think this is the right time to talk about it again and set on a more formal release cycle process. So as I said before, the flow of pull requests has been outstanding and steady for the past 2 years, so since the beginning of Symfony 2.0. And with such an activity, trying to release often without a clear roadmap is quite difficult, is near to impossible, really. So adopting a more formal release cycle will also give more visibility to the contributors and allow everyone to understand when a new feature might be available in Symfony. Warning, a bit of warning here. I'm going to talk about the release process for Symfony, meaning the Symfony/Symfony repository on GitHub. I'm not talking about the bundles or SwiftMailer or Twig or Doctrine or whatever. It's really about Symfony, the framework, right? But of course, if some others want to adopt the same principles, I would be more than happy. And I think it would ease the integration and the coordination also a lot. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So let's see the goals for the new process. First, I want to shorten the release cycle, right? So I want to be able to release more often for all the reasons I've just talked about. The second one is I want to keep backward compatibility between all the releases as much as possible. If we release more often, we need to keep backward compatibility, right? So we will be able to release more often with more confidence about the code. The third one is I want to enhance the overall quality of the framework. And when I talk about quality, I'm not talking about the code. I'm talking about the whole ecosystem. I'm talking about the bundles. I'm talking about documentation and so on. Then, I want to give more visibility to our customers, the users, developers using the framework to get their job done, but also all the open source projects using or embedding Symfony into their products. I want to improve the experience of Symfony core contributors, right? Right now, you can't know when a pull request will be merged. Will be merged for this version or the next one. So you don't have any clue about that. So I want to improve this experience. I want to coordinate our timeline with other projects we are using and the projects that are using Symfony. And the last one is also important. I want to give time to the Symfony ecosystem to catch up with the new versions, right? So that when we make a release, the whole ecosystem is ready, documentation and bundles and so on, right? But it's also about documentation and the translations and so on, right? So shorten the release cycle, backward compatibility, enhance the overall quality of the framework, visibility for our customers, visibility for the contributors, coordination between all the projects, and giving more time for the Symfony ecosystem to catch up. So I've been thinking about the best possible solution for that, and I think that I want to adopt a time-based release from now on, right? So it's up to the discussion, so we can discuss that, but this is what I propose. So instead of waiting to be ready for release, and that's what was happening before, we know in advance that when we are going to make a release, and then we can plan accordingly, right? So the next question is, what is the right amount of time between two releases, right? 6 weeks, like Firefox, or 6 months, like Ubuntu? And, historically, we've been able to release every year since 2005. And again, nothing was ever written about that, but that's what we did. But I think that with a time-based approach, we can do better. We can do faster releases, and we should be able to release a new major version every 6 months. And it is probably the best compromise. It gives plenty of time to work on new features but at the same time, it also allows us to postpone non-ready features for the next version, and without to wait too much for the next cycle. 6 months means that we can fit 2 versions every year, right? So it fits in a year. So everybody knows when releases will be made without to check anything on the website. So for Symfony, I want to make one release at the end of May and another one at the end of November of each year. I thought about that a lot, and I think May and November are the best month. Don't ask me why. I don't know. Yeah, and Symfony 1, Symfony 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4 were actually released on November, so I think it makes sense. So that brings predictability and visibility to our users. 6 months can be seen as a rather short period of time to make a new release, especially if we look at what we did earlier in the past. But I think we can make it for many reasons. The first one is because we will be able to plan the release, of course. Then because nowadays we have so many people helping, so many contributors. So we have a lot of people being able to to push the software forward. Because we have a huge amount of unit tests, and now we have Travis, so we can easily automate the tests for all the platforms we want to support, all the PHP versions we want to support. Because we are using Git and GitHub, Git provides a lot of tools to help us with easy branching and the pull requests and much more. And also because when I'm talking about 6 months, I'm really talking about shorter period of time. So here it is how it could work. Oh, okay. So during the 4 first months, we can work on new features, enhancements, and this is the development phase, right? So during the development phase, we can work on new stuff, but we can also revert things if we think that we won't be able to finish them on time. Then we freeze the code and we enter the stabilization phase. So we have time to fix bugs, prepare the release, and wait for the whole ecosystem to catch up. That's why it is quite long, right? And during the stabilization phase, of course, some developers might want to work on the next version, but I think it would be better if most of us can focus on finishing the current version. And then we have the support, right? So 4 months for the development, 2 months to stabilize the version, and 8 months of support. Which means that you have 2 months to upgrade to the next version. But of course, it's a bit more complex than that, because we also need to talk about long-term support releases, right? So we had a long-term support releases for Symfony 1, Symfony 1.0, and Symfony 1.4, Symfony 1.4 being still maintained. So 8 months of support is only for standard releases, right? And for LTS releases, I propose to keep what we did before, so 3 years of maintenance for LTS, right? And I want to give, a year of overlap between 2 long-term support release, which means that we are going to have a new LTS release every 2 years. So that's the way we can make everyone happy. If you are a fast mover, if you want the latest and the greatest, then you can stick with the standard support releases. You have a new version every 6 months, and you have 2 months to upgrade to the next one, right? If you are a big company, if you want more stability, then you can stick with the long-term support release, right? You get a new version every 2 years, and you have a year to upgrade to the next one. So it means that I can tell you when Symfony 2.9 will be released, and you can guess. I mean, no, you can't, not yet. So this is Symfony 2.0, and this is Symfony 2.1. So Symfony 2.1, so this is where we are now, just released, and the work has just begun on Symfony 2.2. So Symfony 2.2 is going to be released in February next year. Yeah, it's not May, it's not November, because we need to synchronize, and that's why, for Symfony 2.3, you can see that we won't have that much time to release the long-term support release, because Symfony 2.3 will be more or less the same version as Symfony 2.2, except that we are going to remove all the backward compatibility we have for Symfony 2.0, right? So it will almost be about removing the backward compatibility layer we have for Symfony 2.0. And it will be released in May next year, right? And then everything else is easy to understand and to guess, right? So to answer the question, Symfony 2.9 will be released in May 2016. I won't be there. So, yeah, that's quite impressive, right? So every time you have a new release, you have 2 months to upgrade to the next one. And when we are talking about the long-term support release, you are going to have a full year to upgrade, right? Which is really different from Symfony 1, right? Symfony 1, we had a 1-year support, which means that whenever we had a new version, we stopped the support for the previous one. So you had exactly 0 days to upgrade. You had to upgrade right away, right? And that's the problem we are facing right now with Symfony 1.4, because the end of support is at the end of November this year, right? Yeah. But the next LTS version will be released next year. So I think we are going to extend the support for Symfony 1.4. So to make it work better, we also need to avoid, breaking backward compatibility as much as possible. We cannot afford to break backward compatibility that often, and also because, we are going to maintain 3 or 4 versions in parallel. So, so if we break backward compatibility, merging all the changes between all the branches, that's going to be a mess pretty fast. So, also because I want people to be able to upgrade easily, and take Twig as an example. I've been able to release a new major version every 6 weeks since Twig 1.0. It was possible because I've kept backward compatibility. So if you have some templates and if they work on Twig 1.0, they work also on Twig 1.6, 7. I don't even remember the current version. Anyway, 1.9, I think. So that's very fast. Also because the scope of Twig is also smaller than Symfony, so it is probably easier. But the key is really keeping backward compatibility. And every time we want to break backward compatibility, we must be very careful. And I think, breaking backward compatibility for some of the components is a big no-no, right? So if this is the case for, the console, dependency injection, the event dispatcher, the HTTP foundation, HTTP kernel, the routing system. So for those components, I don't want to break backward compatibility, never. I mean, except if there is a huge problem with the component, or if we need to change the API because of a security issue. But for everything else, no. For some components, I think backward compatibility should be easy to keep. For the browser kit and CSS selectors and DOM crawler, the finder, process, and YAML should be easy enough. And then for some components, we are not there yet, right? The config, the form, security, translation, and serializer. I think we are not there yet, but we are working out And obviously, we need to be ready for Symfony 2.3. The last thing I want to talk about is coordination. Coordination would be the next step, right? We have fixed the dependency management problem in PHP thanks to Composer. And you know, Composer is probably one of the most exciting projects in the PHP world right now. Yeah, Symfony 2. Now, I think we need to work on, you know, on coordination between projects, right? We are all using pieces of, you know, some libraries from project A and some others from project B. And so that's not easy because there is no coordination between other projects. So that's also why I want to adopt, you know, a time-based release process for Symfony so that we can tell the world this is when we are going to have some releases. And if some other projects can, you know, adopt the same model, that would help the whole ecosystem a lot. Yeah, so I've talked about, you know, the huge number of contributions we have every single day on Symfony, and to make the process works best, I think we also need to formalize the way you contribute. We contribute to the code a bit more. I don't know if you're aware of that, but every time you make a pull request on Symfony, you need to add a small header with, you know, there is a checklist so that we are sure that you've checked that the unit tests still run after your patch, that you have updated the documentation, that, you know, some stuff like that. But, you know, I've done a poor job in enforcing this rule, so I'm going to be, you know, more pushy with that now. And I also like to introduce more checks to the list, so that, you know, to be sure that there is no backward compatibility break. Be sure that we apply the fix, if it is fixed, to the you know, the oldest version of Symfony. I mean the oldest supported version of Symfony. I think that's a lot to ask to contributors, but this is really critical for the success of Symfony. Okay, so this was about the release process. Now let's talk about Symfony 2.2. So Symfony 2.1 was released last week, and work has already started on Symfony 2.2. And as a matter of fact, we already have so many pull requests, you know, waiting in the pull request queue. And I think that's also because, you know, we missed the opportunity to release Symfony 2.1 earlier this year. So we have been accumulating a lot of pull requests in the queue. So we already have almost all the new features that will be available in 2.2. So just have a look at the pull requests we have. So let's talk about a few of them. The first one I want to talk about, and this is probably one of the most requested features nowadays, is the hostname pattern for routes. We had quite a few pull requests, but I think this one is the one which is going to be merged anytime soon. And the thing is, so whenever you have a route, right, you have some variables, and we try to match the path, right, here /hello/Symfony with the pattern. And for the hostname, as of Symfony 2.2, you will be able to do exactly the same. So if you want to match symfony.example.com, you will be able to declare a pattern for the hostname. So this is how it's going to work. So this is just an example with annotations. So the first one is the pattern for the URL, the path info really /hello/world, and then you can also have a hostname pattern, right? It works in the exact same way. So you can have variables, you can have requirements. That is exactly the same, right? Quite easy. And it works for a single route or for a collection. So it is rather flexible. The next one is actually a new component we are going to have in Symfony 2.2, and this one is, you know, is quite old. The pull request is really old now, and this is the resource watcher component. So basically, this component allows you to track file system changes on your machine, and it works on Linux and on the Mac and on Windows. And this is something that is going to be really useful for aesthetic, for instance. Whenever you change, a style sheet, you can just drag the change on the file, and it's going to recompile everything under the hood. Another example is the cache system we have in Symfony, the configuration cache system we have in Symfony. So whenever you change a configuration file, right now, for every request, we need to check all the files to be sure that they were not changed. And so that takes a lot of time. Now we can just delegate that to the operating system. So it should be cool. So I won't explain the code, but you can track file creation, file modifications, and file deletions. So that's good. And the last one, I wanted to talk about this one because this pull request comes from the Drupal guys, the binary file response. So, from time to time, you need to manage, you need to send a file from your code, from a controller. That's not that easy. You need to take care of a lot of different headers to get it right. So, as of Symfony 2.2, this is how you will be able to do that. Also because, whenever possible, you need to delegate that to the web server so that you don't have a full PHP process just sending raw data to the web server, to the browser. And doing that depends on the web server you are using. So all the details are included into this new binary file response class. We also, this is interesting also, we're going to have quite a few changes, additions to the security bundle and component. And one of them is the addition of secure random number generator. Again, this is not easy to get right, so this is nice that we have a solution provided by Symfony, and many more. Just have a look at the pull requests we have. We have many, many different pull requests, many new features. We are talking about a new cache component, a progress helper for the console, and many more, really. So this is really exciting. Yeah, I've already talked about backward compatibility, but I want to come back to it a bit. So, as I said before, the Symfony 2.3 release will be the first LTS version. And so 2.2 is really our last chance to break backward compatibility. After that, it will be really difficult. I mean, I will be the one who will say no a lot. Be warned, right? And that's fine, because yeah, Symfony 3 again. So after release of Symfony 2.3, backward compatibility will be kept at all costs, really. And we might accept small breaks, but only for non-strategic components, really. For everything else, the feature, a new feature or a new enhancement that breaks backward compatibility will be, added to a list for Symfony 3, right? And whenever we are comfortable with the list and we think that we have enough pains, then we can just start working on Symfony 3. But Symfony 3 won't be, okay, I can't pronounce 3 in English, so I think we are just going to skip this number and yeah, let's pretend it does not exist. It will be Symfony 4. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to talk about today. If you have any questions, I think we have quite a few already, so, okay.
What are good practices for using individual Symfony components?
I think Symfony is not a framework. Symfony is a project, right? And I think the main asset of Symfony is in, the components, right? And then we have the full stack framework. This is really a byproduct of the components. This is just a demonstration of what you can do with the components. And the same goes for Silex, right? So I think if you have a legacy code, instead of trying to migrate from the legacy code to Symfony to the full stack framework. You can start by, just injecting some of the Symfony components. And that's exactly what the Drupal guys are doing right now. They are not, they're not trashing away all they have. What they are doing, they are taking one component at a time, and they replace what they have today with what we have in Symfony. And I think that's the same story with PHP Documenter, right? So they are trying to remove code, their own code, with standard code, right? Code that is better tested, really. And I think the first step, if you want to do that, is adopting the HTTP kernel, right? Wrapping the whole application with the HTTP kernel, so that you can have a request, which is a Symfony request, and at the end you have a Symfony response, right? So when you have that, you can have functional testing, for instance, for free. You can have the Symfony built-in reverse proxy for free, right? So the first step would be to create a very small, thin wrapper on top of the application so that you have a request as an input and a response as an output. And for all the details, really, it depends on your code. So I can't really talk about that more than that. And if you want to know more about how you can do that, you can also read my blog post. I wrote a series of articles about how to create your own framework based on the Symfony components. I think it's great if you want to create your own framework, of course, but I think it's a good read if you want to understand how Symfony works, and also if you want to replace your own code with some of the Symfony components. It will give you a lot of insight and how things work together, right?
Okay. Another question from Paul Dixon at Alexander Street Press says, we are a company which has recently adopted Drupal for front-end and Symfony for middle-tier web services. What advice would you give us on how we can contribute our experiences back to the community?
Good question. Actually, that's something we don't have that much feedback. I mean, feedback not from the code, but feedback from real-world experience. How people use Symfony for their project. Not on a technical basis, but really how easy it was to adopt Symfony, how easy it was to learn Symfony, how easy it was to get all the developers, be productive with Symfony. What problems they had when doing that, all those stuff. So if you want to share that with us, the community, I would be more than happy to, publish that on the Symfony blog post. We've done that in the past, but not that much. So if you want to share, you are more than welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Can you put your hand up, Paul? Thank you. Good question. Question from John from Alexander Street Press. This is, you can pay for consultancies. It's €3,000 a day, I believe. How much service decomposition is too much? E.g., a service of one page building on 25 other services. Can you go too far?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to answer the question because it really depends. There is no hard answer on that, right? This is, in a controller, how many lines for each action? 5, 10, 20, 40? Annotations included or not? So it really depends. And I think, you need to be pragmatic. So best practices, that's good. Design patterns, good. But at some point, you want to get the job done. So you need to be pragmatic. So whatever works for you, that's good, right?
Okay, thanks, John. And we'll see who you are. Thank you. This one's written by a man. That's all it says. You are French, and the French are always very well dressed. What are your favourite clothing brands?
So this is a reference with Dries error thing. Okay.
Why has something so ugly, such as Symfony's config validation, made it into production releases?
What?
Hands up. Who asked this one? Yeah, I thought as much. Why has something as ugly as Symfony's config validation made it into production releases?
I need more information, you know.
Yeah, he doesn't
Don't
agree.
have enough details.
Okay, which key strength do you think has made Symfony, unlike any other framework, a success?
I mean, you know, the PHP market is really huge. So I think Symfony is successful, but so many other projects are also successful, right? So it's not just about Symfony. I don't want Symfony to be the one true framework for PHP. That would not make any sense anyway. I think I don't know. I think the fact that we are trying to push the limits, the fact that we are trying to innovate, not in the sense that we are inventing stuff, but the fact that we are trying to bring stuff from other languages and other frameworks to PHP is one key thing, right? I think, dependency injection. We are the one. I started to talk about dependency injection 5 years ago. And I can remember, I remember 3 years ago or 4 years ago at the Zen conference, there was a session about dependency injection, and it was about me and Stefan and, yes, Ralph. And we were talking about dependency injection and why it is a good idea to use dependency injection and a dependency injection container in PHP. And I say, yes, it is really useful, right? And Ralph said, no way, never, ever. Do you know who wrote the dependency injection container for Zen Framework 2? Just guess.
I've got one last question.
No. I mean, and also I think that, when we released Symfony 0.4 in 2005, we released Symfony with documentation and examples and a lot of stuff. It was kind of unique at that time. It's not anymore, but at that time it was quite unique. Also because Symfony was created because I used Symfony, Sensio used Symfony for their customers. So, many frameworks were created by students. And one day, they said, oh, what about creating a framework, right? I learned so many design patterns, so I can create a framework, and they create a framework. That's not what I did, right? I knew nothing about design patterns 6 years ago, right? I knew nothing about dependency injection or a container or what a dispatcher was or whatever. I created Symfony because I wanted something to create projects for our customers, right? And I think people started to use Symfony because they had the same problems, the same issues as we had, right? I can give you many answers to this question, but I think it's also a mix of a lot of things. The thing that for Symfony 2, from day one, I knew that I wanted to create components so that we can reuse them for more than just Symfony. The fact that, today, Drupal is using Symfony, the fact that today, Easy Publish is going to use Symfony, it's not by chance. I wanted, that to happen, right? So my goal is to try to standardize the way we work with PHP. That's why I said that Composer is probably the most exciting project right now in PHP, because it is now so easy to mix and match all the libraries you want thanks to Composer.
Having seen you submit pull requests to Zen Framework 2, how do you achieve a work-life balance?
I don't know.
Okay, thanks, Fabien.